Welcome to your first lesson within the Professional Diploma in Project Management. Today we are going to be answering the question, what is project management? But before we do that, I thought it would be fun to start off with a fun fact. So, did any of you know that there will be 15.7 million new project management jobs created this year? So there's definitely opportunity for all of you to get a nice job after you've completed this course. Now, who am I? My name is Kate Savage and I'm an experienced college lecturer. I've worked within the IT field within project management and I really enjoyed it, so I thought why not come and share all of my experiences with all of you. I've included a quote here that I like to live by, and that is, develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow. So that is something to keep in mind when doing anything really in life, and it applies quite nicely to you completing this course. While I have all of your attention, I just wanted to walk through some housekeeping quickly. Just remember that here with Shaw Academy, you can watch your classes whenever it suits you, either by joining our live lessons where you'll be interacting with Morpheus or through your recordings. Another great thing is that you can change your class date and time whenever it suits you to make sure that learning is always convenient. If life gets in the way or you'd just like to start again fresh, remember that you can start your courses again, and this can be done easily through the app or the website. My favorite thing about the Shaw courses is that you can watch your lessons whenever it suits you at any time of the day, whether you're watching a live lesson or whether you're watching a recording at home. And the best thing about your recordings is that you can watch at your own pace and take notes as well. Here at Shaw Academy we have an AI and his name is Morpheus. And with Morpheus, you can ask him questions during the lesson if you're confused at any point. Please also remember to rate the responses that you receive from Morpheus so that we can improve upon them. Now, if Morpheus doesn't know the answer to your question, you can email me at support@shawacademy.com and I will generally get back to you within 48 hours. Well, that's enough housekeeping, so let's move on to your module outline. So within Module 1, for Lesson 1, we will be answering the question, what is project management? In Lesson 2, we'll be talking about the project initiation phase, and this is where you decide if your project is feasible and whether or not you should continue. Within Lesson 3, we'll be defining the project plan as well as time management. Your project plan is what you will follow through the entire course of your project, and having good time management just makes that process go a whole lot smoother. Then within Lesson 4, we'll be talking about planning, cost and quality and how to control these elements within your project. Lesson 5, we'll be going into change control, risk management and acceptance. Now, change control is based around the idea that things within your project will change. It is very hard to plan for every single possible scenario. And then risk management helps us respond when things go wrong, and acceptance is determining what will be acceptable to your client. Lesson 6 will be covering project execution and monitoring, so actually getting things going on your project and start doing the actual tasks that you need to do in order to accomplish your project goals, and also how to monitor that things are going correctly. Lesson 7 will be how to close a project, all the documentation and the steps needed in order to successfully close a project. Lesson 8, this is quite a cool one and I'm very excited. We will be starting talking about Gantt charts, which are a very vital part of project management as a whole. So there's something to work towards and look forward to. But let's start with the basics. What is project management? Our objectives for today's lesson are to answer the question, what is project management? I'm going to walk you through the project management life cycle. I'm going to introduce you to two different project management methodologies, and these include Agile, which is more recent, and an older style called the waterfall method, which we'll be discussing in more detail throughout this lesson. Then we'll be discussing people who are involved in projects and the different tools of the trade, and this will include different softwares that you can use to help manage your project more efficiently. Let's talk a bit about exactly what a project is. Well, to start off with, projects are happening everywhere. They're happening at work. This can be a new ad campaign, employing a new staff member, or even managing your clients. They're happening at home. I don't know if any of you have ever done renovations, but it definitely counts as a project, or it can even just be managing your housework. They're happening in your neighborhood. This can be roadworks or even block parties or community projects. And lastly, we've got personal projects. Now this could be getting fit, being more social, or even the fact that you're doing this very course. So time to find out a bit more about all of you. What projects are you currently involved with? You can go ahead and type your response into Morpheus. What is a project? Let's break this down into something a bit more simple. Let's say your project is building this bridge. Now it looks simple enough looking at it, but there are a lot of different steps that are going to take place in order to successfully build this bridge. Now by looking at this picture, you can see that it is in a park or a nature reserve. In this case, it is in a nature reserve. And our funding has been supplied by the council that manages it. And the purpose of this bridge is to allow hikers to safely cross the river and access a nearby picnic site. Now what makes this a project? Well, we can break it down. There are two key words. The first, temporary. A project is temporary because it has a defined start and end date, and therefore it has a defined scope and resources. Now what this means is you have a very certain amount of time in order to do X amount of work, and you only have so many resources available to you, and this will differ with any project. So I need to accomplish this amount of work in this amount of time, and I only have this amount of resources available to me. If we break this down even more, your scope would be to build the physical bridge. Your resources would be who is going to be helping you, your physical materials that you need to use, and your timeline would be when you're expected to have the bridge completed by. The second key term is unique. A project is unique in that it is not a routine operation, but a specific set of operations designed to accomplish a singular goal. What do all of you think that the singular goal of completing this bridge would be? Well, simply put, it would be to build the bridge. And why we're building the bridge is so that we can allow people to safely cross the river without disturbing the surrounding nature and without letting anyone get hurt. So in this scenario, its function is unique. What do you think, other than what I've said already, makes this project unique? Or what makes it different from other bridges that may have been built? I've come up with 3 possible options. Firstly, it could be the width of the river. Not every river on the planet has the same width. If there's a rainstorm, would your bridge not simply wash away if you haven't made it high enough? And lastly, what about the budget? You may only have a certain amount of funds allocated to building this bridge in the first place. Now that you've got an idea of what a project is, let's break it down into a few simple areas. Firstly, a project can be broken down into tasks, and tasks are smaller work items that together combine to form a deliverable. Your tasks in this case would be to measure the width of the river, evaluate the weather conditions, and then select your materials. Then we have deliverables, remembering that smaller tasks form deliverables, and your deliverable is a product or service created to meet a project's goal. In this scenario, your deliverable would be creating the bridge frame and building your railings. Then we have our constraints, and constraints are elements that may limit your ability to complete the project. Also known as your limitations. These can be time, cost, legal requirements, or even permits. And in this scenario with our bridge, your constraints would include things like your budget and your available resources. Then lastly, we have milestones, and milestones represent the sequence in which your project must be executed. With our bridge, we would start by gathering the measurements, then we'd build a frame, fit our planks into the frame, and then varnish it. After we're done with that, we would then secure the railings and cement the bridge into place over the river. This sounds very obvious, but imagine if you started off building the frame once you'd laid the cement. So you'd have your resources or the people helping you in the river setting up planks and fitting railings. So in a small scale project it seems obvious, but if you've not planned correctly, you can often find yourself in a hypothetical river building a bridge. So this is why project management is so important. Another way to look at a project in its most basic form is to break it down in what you aim to achieve. Well, with the bridge project, we're aiming to allow hikers to cross the river safely. Now, how do we plan to achieve this? We are going to build a bridge, and we're going to ensure that the railings are sturdy. How much time do we have? We've been told that summer is the most popular hiking season. This will allow us 3 weeks to construct the bridge. Then we've got costs to consider, and we need to remember that we have limited council funding that we'll need to pay for our raw materials, labor, and the design of the bridge. Think back to any project you've worked on recently. Have you considered these elements already? Or are you going, I really should have thought of this? Have you also considered the effect that having a deadline on a project has on you? When you know you've got only a certain amount of time, we're often much more productive. For now, let's just keep things simple. Let's talk about the project management process. As I said when walking you through your module guide, we will start off with project initiation. So this will be deciding that you would like to build this bridge and that it is a feasible option for you to build the physical bridge. So you will define the project and set up expectations. So the project is, we're going to build a bridge, and the expectation is that it will help hikers safely cross the river. Once you've established how you're going to do all of this, you will then move on to planning. So you will create a plan with a schedule, so how long do you have and what needs to be done during this time, your tasks, so measuring the river as I mentioned earlier, your resources, the people who are going to help you build this bridge, and the different raw materials that you'll need, and also your budget. Your budget may restrict the amount of people that you can have working on the bridge, which then will affect your schedule and your tasks. So this planning stage is vital to consider all aspects of your project. Once you're happy with your plan and it's been signed off, in this case by the council, you can then move on to execution. Now within the execution phase, this is where you start implementing your project plan, and your project plan details every little step that you need to go through in order to complete your project. It is like your little black book of exactly what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. So now you've built the bridge, you've gone through the execution phase, and you've followed your project plan. Then you'll have to go on to monitoring. You're not just going to build the bridge and then walk away and hope that everything's okay. Well, I hope not. You're going to monitor it. You're going to go and check the measurements, check the wood is sturdy. You're going to follow a process of making sure that it is safe. In this scenario, we're going to ask ourselves, is the bridge safe and is it what we wanted? If it is, in which case we've achieved our aims and we have happy stakeholders. So the council is happy with what we've done. We would then move on to closing the project. We've reached the project goal of building this bridge. We've compiled all of our documents and reports and we've handed it over to the council and we are now done. Now the world isn't perfect and neither are we, so sometimes changes need to be made. Let's say for argument's sake that the wood we've chosen has been identified as wood that will decay in the weather conditions where our bridge will be built, and we need to go back through the process and incorporate a new type of wood. So through monitoring, we've identified that the wood will not hold. We then have to go back and plan how we're going to fix this problem and then build again or replace certain elements of the bridge with a more suitable raw material. Now, once we've done that, it would go back into monitoring, it would be evaluated again, and only then, if we're happy, will it move on to the closure phase, where it will be sent off to the council, and our bridge will be built, and there will be some very happy hikers. Your key takeaway here is that this process can repeat multiple times, and you can also call this process of repeating tasks an iteration. There you have it. This is our project management process. But there are different approaches to how to manage a project. And these are two very popular ones we are going to discuss next. First up, we have the waterfall method. And the waterfall method follows a linear approach, which could be why it's called a waterfall. The water is all flowing down. It can't go back up. It can only go down. And it also relies on dependencies, so tasks that can't be done without the previous task having been finished. And you're going to gather all of your customer requirements at the beginning. But let's have a look at an example of a waterfall method being used. That's quite commonly used within IT. You'd start off by defining your requirements. The key aspect of the waterfall method is that all your requirements are gathered at the beginning of the project. This would allow you to then carefully plan out each phase without involving the customer any further. And you need to then at this point assume that you've gathered every requirement, because your customer will not see the project until it is complete. So this can be a service that you're providing or a product. Now you've gathered all your requirements, you know what the customer wants. Now you need to design it. Your design phase is best broken up into logical design subphases, taking it bit by bit. If you're working with a website, for example, you would then have designing the home page first, then you would move on to the contact us page, and then logically move through each phase of design. During this time, you will then brainstorm different ideas for how you'd like to design this website. Then you'll move on to implementation, and the implementation phase is when programmers or web developers will actually start to make the functionality of your website, allowing your end users to navigate through your site and perform different functionalities within your site. What this means is they're taking the design and bringing it to life. So everything looks pretty, but now we need it to work, and that is what the implementation phase is for. Then we have verification, and this phase is where the customer reviews the project and they make sure that it meets all the requirements that you laid out within the requirements phase. This is when you hand over the product or the project to the customer to check. Now remember, until this point, the only time they've been involved is in the requirements phase, so they really are walking in blind, unsure of what you're going to give them. Then we have the maintenance phase. With software, your customer will often be using your software, if not daily, so it is imperative that you watch for bugs, any features that aren't working correctly, errors that might be showing up, or even the speed of the program that you've developed, so you will need to maintain it. As you know, technology is changing every day, so it is vital that you monitor what is going on with your software and make sure that it is still relevant, especially if you'd like to be used for further projects in the future. So that is the waterfall method. The other very popular approach within software development as well is called the agile methodology. Let's go and have a walkthrough of the agile methodology, and we'll use the example of building a website again. Let's start at the beginning. We'll start off by planning our project. So what do we want to achieve in this project? What is our project goal? Once our initial planning's been done, we'll then move on to defining the requirements. So what exactly does the customer want, and how do we plan to deliver it? Once we know all of this, we'll then move on to development and implementation. So physically writing the code and making the website live so that we can see exactly what is going on and how everything is working. Once the developers are confident in what they've done here, you will then move on to initial testing, and this is essentially when another team of people tries to break what you've made. This is where you'll pick up bugs like different pages not working. We all know the frustration of being on a website when you can't navigate to the next page or even navigate back to where you were before. So initial testing is used to identify these errors or bugs within your website. Once you've found all your bugs and errors, you'll then move on to developing and implementing again. So you've identified more problems. You're going to define the requirements, so what is required of you in order to fix these problems, and then you will develop and implement them again. Once you've done that, those changes will then be tested. So your client will now test the website. This is a vital phase within the Agile process, because there are two ways that this can go. Either the client is now happy, and then you'll move on to system testing. And if everything goes well within your system testing, you will then move on to releasing the website, so making it live so that users and their potential customers can actually access this website. Something that often happens within your system testing is when there's a beta model. So You release something knowing full well that it may not work 100% how it's supposed to, but within here you then allow your users to identify the problems for you, and then you go back and fix them. Now, if it doesn't go your way and your system is not perfect and it doesn't get cleared to be released, you then will move on to a second iteration of this agile process. So within the client testing, again, you will identify problems and changes that need to be made. Then you will find out how you're going to incorporate these changes. And once you've done that, you'll then move on to your next iteration, where you will plan how to incorporate these changes. And so you will move through this process again, and after client testing, you'll then have to decide again whether yes, the website is complete, or no, it is not complete. Now, how many times you go around this little circle or little process is completely dependent on your product and your project. There is no real limit to how many times you can go around the agile methodology, which is why it is very popular with software development. Another important term to remember is minimal viable product, and this links up to agile in terms of our iterations within the life cycle. An MVP helps you get data early on and confirms that users are interested in your product. And what's nice about this is your positive results within your initial MVP stage then give you the green light to carry on with the rest of your project. By creating and testing an MVP, you can identify these key elements. You can save time and resources by making sure you're investing in a project that's likely to be successful. By creating and testing an MVP product, it allows you to save time and resources because you release an initial project or initial website, and before investing more time and money into it, you can establish whether people are actually going to go to the website in the first place and if it will be a valuable use of your time. Within this, you'll also find out if your website or your product is appealing to potential users. Is there too much competition? Will they even get to your site? Will you be seen on Google? These are all things that would need to be considered and that you could evaluate during MVP. You need to find out what trends you can take advantage of and then adapt that to the full version of your product. If while you're building your product a new trend arises where people are using, let's say, black and white images throughout their site, you could then adapt your website or your product at that stage. You can also acquire a potential user base, so see which different kind of clients are actually visiting your site. Why this is valuable is then you can adapt your site to the viewers that you are getting. If you find you're getting more of a teenage client base, then you can adapt your website to be a bit more fun and engaging for younger users. And you can also save time and money on developing the final product. Agile development and MVP often go hand in hand, and that is why it is valuable for you to understand this term because you will be encountering it a lot during the project management process. Just as a quick reference, here are the key differences between the Agile and Waterfall methods. Your Agile method has an incremental approach, meaning that you can go around it many different times through many different phases. The Waterfall method is more of a sequential design, meaning that it has to follow a certain set of steps, and you're only doing these steps once. The Agile methodology is also a lot more flexible because changes can be incorporated more easily as you move through the process. Your Waterfall method, on the other hand, is a lot more rigid as all of your requirements and design have been done at the beginning of the project and are then not able to be changed later on. Your Agile method has a collection of many different projects, as in mini projects, that get completed along the way with each iteration of the method. Your Waterfall method, on the other hand, is one single project, so one thing to deliver at the end of the day, where you may deliver certain aspects with each iteration within the Agile methodology. So two very different approaches, but it all depends on the environment that you're working with and the team that you are managing as well, which one of these methods you decide to use. The next thing I'd like to discuss with all of you are the key players within the project. So who actually has a say in what you are doing as project manager? Well, you've got 4 key players. You've got your project executives, your project stakeholders, the project sponsors, and your project team. Let's go break each of these down for a little bit more detail. Your project executives are in charge of workplace management that directly manages short and long-term projects. To put this into perspective for you, the bridge that we're building to help the hikers would be considered a short-term project, whereas building this would definitely be considered as a much longer-term project. This must have taken years to build. Your project executives are also in charge of communicating with your upper management, so they're going to go and fight some of the big battles for you, which is why, in most cases, project managers love their project executives. They'll also be monitoring project performance both internally and externally. What this means is they will just be there making sure that everything is going according to plan within the company and also with any external stakeholders or vendors that you may be using within your project. After your project executives, you've got your project stakeholders. Now, this is a term you will be hearing a lot from me because they are very key elements within project management. Now, what is a stakeholder? They are the people who are invested in your project. So what happens in your project will affect all of your stakeholders. So they will be affected by your project at any point along the way. So the more you succeed, the more the stakeholders will succeed. But if your project goes badly, it also may affect them negatively in terms of finance or in terms of their reputation. And it's important to remember that the input from your stakeholders can directly impact the outcome of a project. Remember that your stakeholders also have very valuable industry experience in most cases that can be applied to your project. They may even identify potential risks to your project that you may never have thought of that they've run into in previous projects. Whenever you're working on a project, just remember that your stakeholders are a resource and that you should use them whenever you can. Then we've got our project sponsor. Now, your project sponsor is a person or group who provides the resources and support that will help you complete your project. In other words, they will help you achieve success. A project sponsor is also one level above a project manager. What this means is your sponsor will go and gather the funds and then present the allocation to your project manager, who will then need to stay within this budget. And then last and definitely not least is your project team. Your project team are the staff resources who together have the skills and expertise that you need in order to complete your project goals. These are the people that you'll be working with mostly on a daily basis, and they will be the people working very hard in the background to get your project done. Project teams can be made up of dedicated staff. These are people who are working solely on your project and on no other projects within the company. So they will only be part of your team of building the website or building that bridge. Then you've got part-time staff. Often what companies will do is have someone who specializes in, let's say, website design, and they will share this person throughout different projects when it comes to the design phase. So here you can have a temporary staff member who comes in to help you, and then once he's done with your project, will then move on to the next project. The members of your team will complete activities such as giving their expert advice on different topics, completing deliverables and objectives, making sure that all of your documentation is up to date so that closure can happen very smoothly at the end of your project, and they'll work with your team just to make your project a great success. Your project team are the heroes within your project. These are the people you'll be working with every day. So remember to always appreciate the project team. Now it's time to see who's been listening. Who does a project manager report to? Is it A, the project owner, B, the project team, or C, the project sponsor? You can go ahead and type your response into Morpheus if you think you know the answer. If not, you can also go and watch the recording again to refresh anything that may have confused you. Alright, I've given you enough time. The answer is C, your project sponsor. Your project manager will directly report to your project sponsor. Just as a recap for anyone who's still a bit confused, you've got your project sponsor who gathers funds in order for you to complete this project. Then you've got your project manager and your project team. So your project manager manages the project team, and the project sponsor tells the project manager what to do. And then don't forget, very importantly, you've also got your project stakeholders, and they sit between the project sponsor and the project manager. Your project sponsor will communicate with the stakeholders, and you as the project manager can also communicate with stakeholders in order to make sure that they are always happy. For anyone who's still a little bit confused, let's walk through some key differences between the project sponsor and the project manager. Most importantly, who appoints each of these people? Well, your project sponsor is appointed by your portfolio manager or the CEO of your company. Your project manager, on the other hand, is appointed by your project executives. Now, in certain cases, your project sponsor may also assign a project manager. So it'll either be the project executives or the project sponsor that appoint a project manager. Then you have responsibility. Your project sponsor is in charge of realizing the company benefits. So what does the company get out of it if we build this website? Your project manager needs to achieve the critical success factors, meaning it needs to hit any benchmarks that would determine that your project has been successful. Then we have cost, and your project sponsor is charged with raising the funds that will help finance your project, and your project manager will then need to manage these funds to ensure that you stay within your allocated budget. Then we have time, and your project sponsor is in charge of determining when the project needs to be complete, whereas your project manager just needs to ensure that he meets these deadlines. Then very importantly, we also have quality, and your project sponsor determines the quality required in order to suit the niche market for the product. What level of quality do you need in order to compete with other products out there? The project manager, on the other hand, is responsible for ensuring the quality meets the standards set out in your project charter, which will happen during the initiation phase. And then lastly, we've got risk. Now, risk is handled in the same way by the project sponsor as it is by the project manager. They need to identify and respond to risks that could prevent or limit the benefits of the project and its objectives. So risk is shared between the sponsor and the manager. With all of these things considered, how do we determine if a project has been successful? Well, our measurable outcomes would be scope, time, and cost. Now, these three altogether come to form what we call an iron triangle or a triple constraint. Now, the concept here is scope is the amount of work required in order to complete a project. So in order to build the bridge, we need to do X amount of activities, as we spoke about earlier, as in building the frame, laying down the wood, the cement foundation. All of that would then fall into scope. Time would be the fact that we only have 3 weeks in order to complete the project, and cost would be the funds allocated to us by the council. Now, all of these things together will determine the quality of the product that we produce or the quality of the bridge that we produce. So if suddenly you only had 3 days to complete the bridge, well, that would be a very different result to the bridge that you had 3 weeks to prepare. Your iron triangle links all three of these things together in order to determine the quality of your product. Another very important thing to remember is that your outcomes are measured also by your stakeholder satisfaction. You can deliver everything here perfectly, but if your stakeholders are unhappy, your project will not be considered a success. So you can do the bridge within 3 days, get it done, and do it within budget, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have delivered the quality that was expected of you. So you have to remember that your stakeholder satisfaction is key. It just about holds up the iron triangle. That is how important your stakeholder satisfaction is, because remember that quality equals success. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the different tools that you can use to help you manage projects. Now, there are many different things you need to consider when choosing a software, the first being your task management. What you need to consider here is whether or not you want to have a more visual representation of your teams or whether you'd like to have a more report-based format. Now, what you can do within here is select how personalized you'd also like your software to be. So will each member of your team have their own account that they can then track and comment on different tasks that they are doing, and also how closely you can monitor these tasks. Every project is different, so it's important to evaluate all of these elements before choosing. Then you've got team collaboration. Does your software allow for the team to make comments and change statuses of different processes going on in your project? Or will you still be reliant on the software as well as your own emails? Then learning materials, also something you need to consider, and that is, does your software help you grow as a professional? Do they allow you to upskill through the software and improve on your processes? Then there's email integration. Are you going to be needing to copy and paste everything from your email to your software, or can you simply link them together, and can you link them to other softwares that you may be using as well? Then there's document management. Would your software be able to help you develop documents, or would you need to still continue making them in Microsoft Office and transferring them across, or can you even transfer them across? This may create a lot of duplication of work, and it might not be as neatly organized as you'd like it to be. So definitely something you need to consider when choosing a software. And last but not least, we're always on the move nowadays, so does it have mobile uses as well? A lot of us, myself included, I enjoy taking a tablet into a meeting rather than lugging my laptop all over the place. And also sometimes when you're not at work, something occurs to you about your project and you need to jot it down. It's very handy to have your project management software on your cell phone, because then you can update people on the go. I've considered all of these things and I've made a list of softwares that I would suggest. Let's have a look at my list. First on my list would be Monday.com. And within Monday.com, you start by creating your own personal workflow. With your workflow, you can visualize and highlight elements like time management, text, or locations, and you can share and work with this tool with your whole team and save time by only recording the important documents and conversations. Then we've got Jira, and this is very, very popular among software developers, and it caters mainly to your agile methodology. Within software, these teams can create customizable boards, Kanban boards, and make use of agile reporting in real time. Your users can also track bugs, view any outstanding issues, and monitor time spent on each task. There is also Office Timeline. There is also Ace Project, Build a Trend, Basecamp, Teamworld, Zoho, and Trello. Now, Trello is one I'd like to mention in a bit more detail, because Trello is an online Kanban board. What this means is that it visualizes an entire project in just a single view. Trello makes it possible to make cards and move them around on the board, and these cards can display, for example, conversations, that could be to-do lists, and then you can track your team's progress through these lists in a very simple and visual way. Now, I've mentioned my 3 top picks here within Monday.com, Jira, and Trello. And if you'd like to, within your summary notes, there will be breakdowns of each of the other project management softwares as well. For the purposes of this course, I will be using Monday.com. Now, please know there is a 30-day free trial with Monday.com, and I will advise you in a later lesson when you should sign up so that you can make the best use of your trial period. So can you believe it? We're already nearing the end of our first lesson. I hope you've all had a great time. I've really enjoyed teaching all of you. But let's have a look at what's coming up in our next lesson. Within Lesson 2, we'll be talking about the project initiation phase. And within that, we'll be talking about feasibility studies, deciding whether to carry on with the project or whether it's not going to be worth your while, how you're going to identify scope, so all the work that you need to do in order to complete a project, identifying your project deliverables, the different things that you need to, deliver in order to make your project a success. Then I'll be showing you how to identify your stakeholders and evaluate their interest and influence within your project. We'll also be creating a stakeholder register, and we'll be creating a project charter. There's lots of great stuff coming up in Lesson 2, so I'm really looking forward to that. But just to summarize what we've done today, we've answered the question, what is a project? And we've said that a project is a temporary endeavor with a unique goal. So we have 3 weeks to build our bridge, and the goal is to allow hikers to cross the bridge. And what makes it unique is the width of the bridge and a few other elements that you and myself have identified throughout the lesson. Your project sponsor gathers all the money that you need in order to run your project, and this will be used to find skill sets or even material resources that you need in order to complete your project. What is a project stakeholder? A project stakeholder is someone who is invested in the project. What is a project executive? Someone who is monitoring your project performance both internally and externally. So they're there to make sure that everything is going according to plan, both within your company and outside of it. Then we've got our 2 different methodologies. We've got our Agile, which may repeat as many times as necessary and evolve along the way, and our Waterfall methodology, which follows a linear approach and only has one run through the life cycle. Now I'd like to pose a challenge to all of you, and I'd like you to use the knowledge about project management to identify a place or group of people in which you are the project manager. Once you've identified this, if you'd like to share it with the class, you can also hashtag Shaw Project Management or even post on our Facebook page and show off where in your life you are the project manager. I'd like to say a big thank you all for attending Lesson 1, and you've taken that vital first step into achieving your goal of becoming a project manager. Later on in the week, you'll be moving on to Lesson 2, and there's some really exciting stuff in there, so make sure that you add it to your calendar now before you forget. Just like to say thank you again, and I hope you've all had a great time. Goodbye everyone, and I'll see you for Lesson 2.